Police officer mocks black woman in court, unaware she's a top NSA operative. The court is stunned. You've got to be kidding me. Officer Darren Baxter slammed the file shut, rolling his eyes. Another so-called victim fighting a ticket. Another waste of his time, or so he thought. What he didn't know was that the woman standing across from him wasn't just another defendant. She wasn't here to argue over a broken tail light. She was here to expose something far bigger, a corruption ring buried deep within the system. And today, in this very courtroom, his entire world was about to crumble. But hold on, what happens when arrogance collides with hidden power? Stick around on Dark Stories to find out. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button for Dark Stories and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss this one. Now, let's begin. 8 o'clock in the morning, in the heart of downtown San Diego. The Edward J. Schwartz U.S. Courthouse vibrated with the purposeful energy of lawyers, plaintiffs, defendants, and curious onlookers. The marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the faint scent of disinfectant clung to the air. Rows of benches, reminiscent of pews in a grand cathedral of justice, were rapidly filling with people awaiting their time before the court. Amid the usual hustle, Ebony Brooks stepped through the entrance. She was tall, lean, and exuded a sense of calm that belied her average black suit and unassuming black heels. Her skin glowed with an understated confidence, and her hair, worn in a neat twist, reflected early morning sunlight shining through high windows. Ebony's expression was perfectly composed, her posture impeccable. Clutched in her right hand was a simple leather binder containing a few documents, traffic citations, a vehicle inspection form, and legal notes. To any casual observer, Ebony appeared to be just another defendant in a minor traffic dispute. The docket indicated her case involved a broken tail light and out-of-date registration sticker, and supposedly some resistance to a police officer's commands, a run-of-the-mill scenario that filled the daily court schedule. Yet, if one knew Ebony's true identity, that impression would be laughable. Behind the facade of an everyday citizen was a top operative for the National Security Agency, with training in cryptography, counterintelligence, and infiltration tactics. Ebony Brooks had served at Fort Meade for nearly a decade, working on high-stakes digital intelligence operations before shifting to more field-oriented assignments. No one in this courthouse, at least not openly, suspected that Ebony had spent her career unraveling terrorist networks, investigating complex espionage operations, and neutralizing national security threats. Today, she was after something altogether different, a ring of local corruption that might extend from one crooked cop all the way to politicians, business owners, and criminals with deep pockets. As she waited in line to pass through the security checkpoint, Ebony took a subtle glance across the foyer. Her target soon emerged, a tall, broad-shouldered police officer wearing a pressed uniform and sporting a mustache that looked like it was trimmed with mathematical precision. Officer Darren Baxter. She had studied his face in internal files and high-resolution surveillance images. She recognized his gait, the proud way he tilted his chin, and the faint hint of a smirk that seemed permanently etched on his lips. According to Ebony's classified briefing, Baxter was suspected of falsifying reports, tipping off organized crime figures about pending raids, and orchestrating pretext stops that disproportionately targeted Black and Latino drivers. But every formal complaint had either vanished or been dismissed, thanks to a labyrinthine network of departmental politics and Baxter's father's old connections in city government. The moment Ebony reached the metal detector, she placed her binder in a plastic tray, watched as the guard checked it, and then casually strolled through without any issue. She collected her belongings, thanked the guard politely, and moved into the main atrium, just another face in the crowd. Officer Baxter, several yards away, was deep in conversation with a court security officer, gesturing animatedly as though retelling some heroic tale. Ebony paused at a distance, scanning the corridor leading to the assigned courtroom. She had mapped the entire building layout days ago. She knew which side hallways had fewer cameras, which stairwells were seldom used, and how each courtroom was arranged. Even a minor detail like the location of the judge's bench relative to the jury box might prove crucial if things took a dangerous turn. A quick vibration from her phone signaled a text message, "Eyes on you from second floor." All set. That was her partner for this operation, an NSA field agent named Dylan Price, who was dressed like a paralegal or clerk. He'd surveilled Baxter's interactions from above, ready to jump in if Ebony needed immediate backup. The plan was for Ebony to play her role as the naive defendant, draw Baxter out, and gather enough public evidence to trigger a formal internal investigation. But Ebony also suspected that once Baxter felt cornered, he might reveal bigger players in this corruption ring. She typed a quick response, just a single letter or for Roger, and slipped her phone back into her pocket. Her heart pounded with adrenaline-laced excitement, but her expression remained neutral. By the time she reached courtroom 7C, Ebony felt the same calm, methodical focus that had carried her through so many dangerous missions abroad. At exactly 8:45 a.m., Ebony slid into the last row of the public seating, crossing her legs and setting her leather binder on her lap. She glanced at the digital docket near the judge's bench, confirming that her case would be called around 9:30. Officer Baxter was scheduled to testify. He would likely speak about how Ebony had allegedly refused to hand over her license and had been disrespectful during the traffic stop. Ebony had heard from official channels that Baxter was known for mocking drivers, especially black women, whom he saw as easy targets. The question now was how openly he would reveal that side of himself in a courtroom. Unbeknownst to Baxter, Ebony was not merely fighting a petty citation. She carried years of experience in exposing criminals far more sophisticated and ruthless than one municipal cop. Today, she intended to systematically dismantle his facade, draw out his arrogance, and plant the seeds for his eventual downfall. Only Ebony knew that the court drama was just act one of a much larger play. Can you imagine the shock when the truth explodes? Don't go anywhere, this gets even darker on Dark Stories. Officer Darren Baxter prided himself on being the center of attention. In uniform, he cast an imposing figure, 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders and an air of self-assured power. He spent every morning regaling colleagues with exaggerated stories of his policing triumphs, painting himself as a fearless enforcer of the law. Underneath that facade, however, lay a complicated and ethically dubious history. His personnel file showed a mix of commendations for bravery and repeated allegations of misconduct. Complaints from drivers, mostly from minority communities, stated that he used racially charged language, performed unjustified searches, or escalated routine traffic stops into fraught confrontations. Internal Affairs had launched multiple inquiries, but each time the case either dissolved for lack of evidence or was quietly settled out of court. Rumor in the station halls was that Baxter had powerful friends among local politicians, thanks to his father's tenure as a deputy mayor decades earlier. Standing by the corridor, Officer Baxter checked his watch, 8:48 a.m. He liked to arrive early to the courthouse so he could banter with security staff and lawyers, flaunting a casual arrogance. Today's hearing was about a mouthy woman who had dared to question him during a late-night traffic stop. Baxter often singled out such individuals for citations or even arrests, believing that any pushback against his authority deserved swift punishment. In his mind, Ebony Brooks was just another troublemaker who needed to be taught a lesson in the legal system. Spotting Ebony across the foyer briefly, he recognized her from the night he stopped her car. She had the same self-assured posture, the same calm eyes that had irked him during the traffic stop. Unaccustomed to being challenged, Baxter felt a twinge of annoyance at the memory. She had dared to ask why she needed to step out of the car and had demanded to see his probable cause. He'd ended up writing her a citation that included an allegation of non-compliance, fully expecting that she'd either pay a fine or lose the case outright. But here she was, apparently ready to fight back in court. Baxter resolved to humiliate her publicly. He downed the last of his coffee and tossed the cup into a nearby trash can, missing by a good 6 inches, without even glancing to see if it landed. He strolled toward courtroom 7C, the way he carried himself, chin high, hands clasped behind his back, suggested a man convinced of his own invincibility. No dashcam footage or contradictory witness, he believed, could stand against his word. He was confident the judge would side with him, a veteran officer, after all. Hadn't it always worked in his favor? Ebony's case was eventually called, and she rose to approach the defendant's podium. Officer Baxter took his place on the opposite side, accompanied by a junior prosecutor assigned to the municipal court. Judge Marianne Cole, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair, presided over the hearing. Her reputation was one of strict fairness, and she was known to take no nonsense from either side. "All rise," the bailiff announced, prompting everyone to stand momentarily. The judge seated herself and nodded for both parties to proceed. The prosecutor spoke first, reading the city's case. Ebony Brooks was charged with operating a vehicle with a broken tail light, failing to provide identification promptly when asked by a police officer, and resisting an officer's instructions during a traffic stop, a trifecta of misdemeanor-level infractions that could result in fines or even a short jail sentence in extreme cases. Ebony listened quietly, her face betraying neither worry nor anger. Officer Baxter was called upon to recount his version of events. He stepped forward, addressing the court. On the night in question, he began, I observed Miss Brooks's car with a visibly broken tail light. When I pulled her over, she refused to roll down her window fully. Upon finally rolling it down, she refused to hand over her license or registration. She was confrontational, Your Honor, and kept asking why she was stopped despite my repeated explanations. He exhaled, a performance of feigned exasperation. Ultimately, I had to request backup. She did eventually produce her license, but the entire stop was far more difficult than it needed to be due to her behavior. Ebony looked on with measured calm, waiting for her turn. She knew Baxter had intentionally omitted key facts, that she had politely asked the reason for being pulled over, he didn't answer, that he banged the rear of her car with his flashlight, possibly damaging the tail light on purpose, and that he sneered at her inquiries about probable cause. He also conveniently neglected to mention his condescending references to people like you, which Ebony had found deeply telling. When the judge signaled for Ebony to respond, she stepped up to a small microphone on the defendant's table. Your Honor, there is more to this situation. I have a signed statement from the mechanic who examined my car immediately after the stop. According to him, there was no evidence of a broken tail light. Moreover, Officer Baxter was aggressive from the moment he approached my window, calling me a troublemaker without any basis. She reached into her binder, pulling out the mechanic's report. The bailiff passed it to the judge, who scanned the document with a critical eye. The judge raised her gaze to the prosecutor. Are you aware of this mechanic's statement? The junior prosecutor cleared his throat. We were made aware, Your Honor, but we dispute its validity. It could be that the tail light was malfunctioning intermittently. Also, Miss Brooks did not fully comply initially, she did not immediately present her license. Ebony suppressed a small smile. She knew from training that building a foundation of doubt in a routine hearing could be powerful. She had only begun to peel back the layers, the bigger revelations, like dashcam tampering, were still in her pocket, waiting for the right moment. Judge Cole set the statement aside. Officer Baxter, was there dashcam footage from the night of the stop? Baxter hesitated. The dashcam malfunctioned, Your Honor. There is no recoverable footage. Ebony looked directly at him, her voice clear. I find that very convenient, officer. This seems to happen frequently in your cases, doesn't it? The judge's brow furrowed. Miss Brooks, I will ask you to stick to the specifics for now. Yes, Your Honor, Ebony said with a polite nod. She recognized the need to remain calm and factual. However, she had already sown the initial seed that Baxter's word was not inherently bulletproof. She also knew Baxter's dashcam mysteriously failed on multiple occasions, according to internal records she had unearthed. For now, she would let the tension simmer. Judge Cole glanced at the clock. Given the conflicting reports, I will set this matter for a continued hearing. Officer Baxter, please ensure your department provides any relevant maintenance logs or digital files regarding your vehicle's dashcam by the next court date. Miss Brooks, you may gather your evidence or witness statements. We'll resolve the matter then. Understood, Ebony replied, her voice measured. She met Baxter's stare briefly. He glared back, an expression that radiated hostility. The hearing concluded moments later with a bang of the judge's gavel, and Ebony returned to her seat. Another wave of cases began, so Ebony quietly gathered her things and headed into the corridor. As she passed Baxter, he muttered under his breath. Carla Morton tried to regain control. Your Honor, we object. This is irrelevant to the matter at hand. Miss Brooks is turning this into a witch hunt. Ebony spoke clearly. I'm showing probable motive for the destruction of dashcam footage. If Officer Baxter is indeed on someone's payroll, that payroll might want certain interactions hidden. I believe the entire traffic stop was a pretext for intimidation or some other purpose related to these payments. Baxter finally erupted, voice tinged with anger. This is outrageous. She's lying to save face. She's pulling random data out of nowhere. Judge Cole banged her gavel once, silencing him. Officer Baxter, you will contain your outbursts in my courtroom. She turned her attention to Ebony. Miss Brooks, I'm going to allow a brief evidentiary inquiry. If you can show a legitimate link between these financial records and the missing footage, we'll proceed. But if this is speculation, I will dismiss it. Ebony exhaled calmly, nodding. She had come prepared. She laid out how certain sums corresponded with nights that dashcam footage went missing. She showed partial deposit receipts linking a shell corporation to an account with partial identification that matched Baxter's name or address. Though not a smoking gun on its own, it formed a compelling puzzle. The judge frowned, flipping through each page with growing concern. Carla Morton attempted a last stand. Your Honor, this hearing has turned into a fishing expedition. At most, Miss Brooks has raised peripheral issues. The question remains whether she violated traffic regulations or resisted a lawful stop. We maintain she did. Judge Cole leaned forward, peering at Baxter. Officer Baxter, do you wish to respond to the suggestion that you have a financial motive to erase dashcam footage? Baxter's face flushed, a muscle twitched in his jaw. Your Honor, I have no such motive. This is a smear campaign. I'm a decorated officer, and I've never been charged with misconduct. Charged? No, Ebony interjected softly, but multiple complaints lodged, all mysteriously unproven. There's a pattern here, Your Honor. The judge stared at Baxter for a long moment, then turned to Ebony. Given the severity of these allegations, I'm inclined to recommend a deeper investigation beyond the scope of this traffic hearing. As for the citation itself, Carla Morton tried again. We asked the court not to dismiss the charges prematurely. But the judge had already made up her mind. She exhaled as though pained by the complications. I see no credible evidence that Miss Brooks actually had a broken taillight. The departmental logs are incomplete at best, suspiciously altered at worst. The city's burden of proof is not met. I hereby dismiss all charges against Miss Brooks. A wave of murmurs passed through the courtroom. Ebony forced herself not to smile too broadly. She was relieved, but her real mission was far from done. Officer Baxter's fists clenched at his sides. As the judge prepared to move on, Ebony said quietly, Your Honor, if I may, I ask that the court forward these findings to the District Attorney's Office and Internal Affairs for a formal inquiry into Officer Baxter's conduct. Judge Cole eyed Ebony thoughtfully. I can certainly recommend it. Whether the DA acts on it is another matter. Carla Morton's face darkened. This was a public forum, and Ebony had effectively forced a recommendation for further investigation. Morton slammed her briefcase closed, turning away from Ebony in frustration. The gavel struck, and Ebony's traffic case was officially over. Court adjourned. Officers in the gallery muttered among themselves, while other defendants looked on with curiosity or admiration. Ebony gathered her papers neatly, turning to see Baxter staring at her with livid eyes. He stepped forward, ignoring Morton's attempts to calm him. This isn't over, Baxter spat under his breath, loud enough for Ebony to hear. You're messing with powerful people. Ebony held his gaze steadily. She saw the underlying fear behind his bravado. Then they're welcome to face me, she replied. For an instant, Baxter looked like he might lash out physically, but a bailiff was watching closely, so he pivoted, storming out of the courtroom. Ebony exhaled, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. Stage 1 of her plan, exposing his misdeeds publicly, was done. Now, Ebony would coordinate with Agent Price and the broader intelligence apparatus. With so much evidence swirling, Baxter would be under scrutiny. If he panicked, he might try to destroy more files or reach out to accomplices. Ebony intended to track every move. Outside in the corridor, Ebony noticed Carla Morton speaking into her phone, face tight with displeasure, possibly calling someone higher up to warn them about Ebony's allegations. Ebony walked past, ignoring Morton's glare. She was done fighting in that courtroom. The real war against local corruption was about to intensify. 2 days after the court hearing, Ebony and Agent Price convened at a secure location arranged by the NSA, a small office above an insurance agency with tinted windows and minimal foot traffic. They pinned printouts on a corkboard, copies of financial ledgers, screenshots from the dashcam server logs, the tipster deposit slips, and media articles. Price traced lines between them with a marker. We have half a dozen suspicious transactions to or from accounts tied to Baxter. We also see references to 2 local businessmen with rumored organized crime ties. One name surfaces repeatedly, Carter Linton. He's a property developer with known political connections. Ebony studied the lines. If Linton's paying Baxter for protection, that means local politicians might also be receiving hush money. This is a web. Baxter is just the enforcer. Price nodded, which means if we push Baxter enough, he might flip on Linton to save himself. But that also means we risk him skipping town or taking violent action. Ebony rubbed her temples. We should engage the FBI. This is crossing into RICO territory. But I want to keep a handle on it until we're certain. The last thing we need is half-baked federal raids that scare everyone underground. Price tapped his phone. We have quiet cooperation from an FBI agent named Rita Healy. She's ready to open a case if we supply hard evidence of interstate transactions. Some of these wire transfers show out-of-state accounts. That was good news. Ebony felt a surge of optimism. With the FBI's authority, they could arrest Baxter and seize records from Linton and others in one coordinated strike. We'll gather a bit more. Keep monitoring Baxter's communications if we can. The moment we have enough to ensure convictions, we move. Price agreed. Ebony, after years of infiltration work, knew that timing was everything. Expose a conspiracy too early, and you risk letting key players slip away or destroy evidence. Wait too long, and you risk more violence or infiltration. She was determined to find the perfect moment to drop the hammer. Late on a Monday evening, Ebony got a tip from a minor informant in Baxter's orbit. Baxter planned a secret meeting with Carter Linton to discuss the Ebony problem. Ebony alerted Agent Healy, who arranged a discreet stakeout at an upscale lounge near the marina. Ebony herself stayed hidden in a nearby vehicle with tinted windows, scanning the entrance through binoculars. Around 9 p.m., Baxter arrived, glancing around nervously before entering. Moments later, Carter Linton showed up, wearing a tailored suit and flanked by 2 bodyguards. Over the next hour, Ebony listened to the FBI wire inside the lounge, hidden thanks to a cooperative employee. They heard Baxter ranting about Ebony, how she wouldn't stay in her lane, and how the judge's inquiry threatened them all. Linton sounded calm, advising Baxter to either scare her off or take more permanent measures if necessary. As Ebony listened, her hand tightened around her phone. A final chilling line from Linton: "Let me know if you need someone to handle it. We can't afford a leak." That was it. Ebony exchanged glances with Price in the dark car. The FBI team overheard everything. Linton was actively discussing violence to silence Ebony. They had enough for conspiracy charges. Agent Healy gave the green light. Within seconds, plainclothes FBI agents stormed the lounge. Ebony watched from across the street, heart pounding, as Baxter and Linton realized too late the trap had sprung. Agents shouted, "FBI! Don't move!" The well-heeled clientele screamed. Baxter, wide-eyed, reached for his phone only to have it knocked from his hand. Linton's bodyguards tried to intervene, but the FBI wrestled them down. Amid the chaos, Ebony stepped out of her vehicle, crossing the street. She spotted Baxter being let out in handcuffs. Their eyes locked, his face went ashen. Ebony approached calmly, stopping a few feet away, ignoring the swirl of cameras that some onlookers had whipped out. "Surprised to see me?" she asked softly. Baxter's voice shook with rage. You set this all up." Ebony folded her arms. "You did that yourself when you broke the law and threatened me." He tried to lunge, but the FBI agents tightened their grip. "Who the hell are you?" Ebony reached into her jacket and pulled out her NSA badge, showing it to him discreetly. "I'm Ebony Brooks, National Security Agency. Consider this your official introduction." The look on Baxter's face was indescribable, a fusion of betrayal, anger, fear, and disbelief. He spat. "This isn't real. You're just some traffic violator." Ebony's lip curled into a small smile. "Not anymore, officer. Not anymore." The FBI shoved him into the back of a waiting SUV. Linton and his men were similarly carted off in separate vehicles. Sirens wailed, illuminating the marina's calm waters with red and blue strobe lights. Ebony stood among the confusion, taking a measured breath. The circle of corruption was finally broken. Baxter's arrogance, fueled by ignorance and bigotry, had led to his downfall. In the weeks that followed, Ebony gave closed-door testimony to the FBI and federal prosecutors. A grand jury was convened, and indictments rained down on Baxter, Linton, and a host of others named in Ebony's documentary evidence. The local news stations captured the story of an overlooked traffic case turning into a massive corruption bust. Some headlines read, "NSA operative infiltrates San Diego police corruption." Though Ebony kept her involvement largely confidential, official statements from the Department of Justice confirmed that Ebony's undercover role had been crucial but offered no deeper details. The city reeled. Public trust in the police department wavered, leading the mayor to call for a thorough housecleaning. The newly motivated district attorney's office, chastened by public outcry, cooperated fully with federal agents to root out anyone connected to Baxter's ring. Officer Darren Baxter, once a brazen figure who mocked Ebony in open court, now faced a raft of federal charges: conspiracy, evidence tampering, racketeering, civil rights violations. He underwent multiple interviews, eventually naming other complicit officers and politicians in a futile effort to reduce his sentence. The entire network he had relied upon for protection crumbled, each piece turning on the other in a desperate bid for leniency. Several months later, Ebony found herself back at Fort Meade in Maryland, seated in a sleek conference room within the NSA headquarters. Tall windows overlooked a maze of modern buildings and secure perimeters. The hum of air conditioning and distant chatter of analysts formed a soothing backdrop. Across the table sat Director Karen Blake, a poised woman in her 50s dressed in a dark suit. She smiled as she reviewed the final after-action report Ebony had submitted. "Agent Brooks," Director Blake said, "you completed Operation Thoroughfare with exemplary skill. The local corruption ring's downfall, the arrests, and the subsequent reforms, this is a significant success story, not just for the NSA but for interagency cooperation." Ebony inclined her head. "Thank you, Director. We had strong support from the FBI and quietly from some honest people within the San Diego PD. It was a team effort." Director Blake gestured at the thick file. "Still, you orchestrated the infiltration. You endured personal threats, overcame intimidation, and leveraged your cover brilliantly. This entire operation started as a minor traffic citation that you turned into a major corruption bust." Ebony allowed herself a small grin. "Officer Baxter gave me just enough rope by underestimating me. He thought I was powerless because I was a black woman standing alone in court. That was all I needed." Blake nodded thoughtfully. "Arrogance can be a blindfold." "Well, Ebony, we're proud. The DOJ has recognized your contribution, and you can expect a commendation. As for your next assignment, we have some possibilities overseas, or you could remain stateside for a while." Ebony considered. Part of her longed to return to more global missions, but she also felt a sense of gratification seeing real change happen at home. "I'll review the options," she said at last, "and let you know." They spoke for a few more minutes about logistics, debriefing protocols, and Ebony's well-deserved downtime. As the meeting ended, Ebony rose from her chair, shook Director Blake's hand, and left the conference room. She walked down a polished corridor, feeling the subtle empowerment of returning to her everyday environment, an NSA operative among many. But she carried fresh memories of that local courtroom, where a single arrogant officer had laughed at her, thinking she was just another defendant who could be intimidated or silenced. He had no idea. Smiling faintly, Ebony exited the building into the crisp Maryland air. There was always another mission on the horizon, another pocket of corruption or threat to national security. Yet she felt a rare sense of closure. She had proven once again that even the mightiest conspiracies could crumble under the determination of those seeking truth, and that the law, when wielded by the right hands, could be a powerful weapon for justice. Thanks for watching Dark Stories. Subscribe for more thrilling tales.